Hi guys, are you wondering how to pop your SAT score? Maybe you need 100 points and you got, maybe a week, maybe less than a week. If so, in this video, I'm gonna give you my highest yield tips for the SAT in terms of how can you pop your score fast. My name is Brooke. I've been coaching the SAT and the ACT for over a decade and a half. I've helped students score perfectly on the SAT, on the PSAT, and on the ACT. So I'm going to share with you some of the tips that have helped my students excel to those levels. You can find our online courses where I share even more awesome tips at SupertutorTV.com. Be sure to check them out. We also have a couple of books for the ACT math section if you happen to be prepping for that. And subscribe to our totally free mailing list, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. If you want to read instead of watch, check out the blog. The link is in the description below this video. Tip number one, if you're trying to pop your SAT score, and my first tip is focus on grammar. It is the fastest section to improve. So if you want to improve at 100 points, 50 of that alone should be coming from the grammar, okay? How do you improve your grammar? The first thing you got to do is you got to target what you don't know. How do you do that? Well, first you need to take a practice test. And then you need to kind of go over your practice test and figure out what you missed. Like this is like a practice test results page on our online course, and you can see like if I missed number 3, that's parallel structure. I need to go over parallel structure. We have this engine in our course that helps you do this. Khan Academy also has a bit of this, but I think it's a little bit harder in Khan Academy to trace exactly which question you missed, that is what. So then it's hard to kind of put it together if you made like a couple careless errors or if it was a bubble error, like, you know, it just kind of dumps things at you. But you could also try to use Khan Academy to do this, which is free. You could also kind of try to figure out what is being tested on your own. Now, some of it's going to be really easy. Like if you're missing colons, dashes, and semicolons, you're going to know that you missed that because it's got colons in it, right? If you're missing possessives and apostrophes, there's going to be some possessive there, right? Commas, that's easy. Some of this stuff is going to be harder for you guys to know what it is. Maybe placement, that's where should I put this sentence. Style and usage, right? Parallel structure might be something you didn't know why you got it wrong, and that's why you're getting it wrong because you didn't even realize parallelism was a thing. So those can be harder. Idiomatic usage, diction, those words might be words you don't know or you're not familiar with. So those can be harder to identify, but at least you want to start getting into what did I get wrong and how can I target the things I got wrong? And then you want to go over what you missed. If you want to use our online course or something like that, that's cool. If you want to get a book, that's cool too. If you're going to get a book, I recommend that you get a book from an independent tutor. We'll put some links in the blog that's in the description of this video to give you some tips on what kind of grammar books might be good for you. Now, Khan Academy does have a workout and kind of instructions on a lot of these tips, but I will say that the Khan Academy material is too easy for most of my students. It might help you get from a 400 to a 500, maybe from a 500 to a 550, but at a certain point, you're going to hit a ceiling because their exercises are just way too easy and simple. So I do recommend that you try to get something. If you don't have the money, you can try to get something from the library, but you want to try to work through all of those grammar individual topics. You want to work through a chapter or work through a video or whatever it is that you have, whatever kind of resource you have, and then do a worksheet or an exercise and follow up and make sure that you got it down. Cool? Great. So my next tip is a reading strategy. And that is fast pass, slow pass. So one of the things that a lot of you guys do is you guys fast think the whole test. So you're nervous about time and you get to a question like this and then you maybe read the question, which statement best describes the relationship between the two passages? Then you kind of read through everything and then you're like, God, I don't know. I don't really remember the passage. And then you kind of go back and you don't really know what to do and you're sort of totally disorganized in the way that you approach it. So here's the general approach for a lot of questions, and it doesn't work necessarily on everything, but a lot of them. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to read this. I know you guys don't know these passages. You're like, Brooke, where are we? This is a QAS from April of 2019. But which statement best describes the relationship between the two passages? So I'm going to give you actually my perfect answer in the relationship between the two passages first. And then knowing that perfect answer, I'm going to kind of go through what I've got and I'm going to do a fast pass and then I'm going to do a slow pass. The fast pass means I'm going to kind of go off memory or go off like what I think, quick, get rid of the worst ones and then get to the best two. And then I'm going to try to figure out between those best two what's best. So my perfect relationship between the two passages, I'm just going to tell you guys rather than go back to save us a little bit of time here, is that the first passage says there's this impact theory, which basically says that there was like a meteor or something like that, or some sort of celestial object that like crashed into an ice cap, and there were 3 results from that. And the 3 results are, it started the ice age, right? Ice age cooling, essentially, also known as the Younger Dryas, right? It basically killed off some of the Clovis, so Clovis population plummeted, and a bunch of mammals died out. Okay, so there's a lot of extinction, but this had some people who aren't convinced. And the new evidence equals geological, iridium, etc. in the geological record, okay? So that's my total summary of the first passage, okay? You've got to get good at summarizing to get to that point. But I'm just showing you like the process here, okay? My second passage is basically like a lot of people think the impact theory is terrible, but this guy Meltzer, so there's this guy Meltzer who has this study that basically totally punches this theory in the face and says their carbon dating is crap. And so only 3 out of 29 of the data sets are even any good. Data sets are accurate, okay? So now that I have that set up, I can kind of go through these and say yes, no, maybe. So we have passage 2 presents a critique, yeah, of the central hypothesis described in passage 1. So I don't think it's the central hypothesis of passage 1, but this is like, I'm going to have to tease out this wording a little bit, so I'm going to say maybe. But here's the thing, I don't just pick it just because I kind of like it. And that's where some of you guys screw up, is you just think, oh, I'm just going to pick the one that sounds good and then move on. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be reading every answer choice, one pass through, fast, and then going back and double checking the wording or the, whatever your gut was saying. Then we have passage 2 explains the scientific question addressed by the central hypothesis developed in passage 1. Okay, so there's a central hypothesis in passage 1, and then we have explains the scientific question. I'm not quite sure about that. I'm going to have to double check that. I'm not quite sure. I kind of like A better than B. Passage 2 discusses possible implications of the central hypothesis in passage 1. No, this is not about what comes next. This is just throwing the central hypothesis that they talked about under the bus. And possible implications means what will happen next. That's weird. Passage 2 identifies evidence in favor of the central hypothesis advanced in passage 1. Now, passage 1 does have this thing, like a lot of people think it's terrible, but I don't know if that's the central hypothesis of passage 1, and I might have to go back to double check. So I'm going to go back to where this is and see if it's this, not all will be convinced is a central claim, several leading hypotheses, that's plural, not a single one. And this might have caused it, and if it had not. So it doesn't sound like the author is taking a stance. They're just presenting these different points of view. And they're saying this team argues this, some other people argue that's wrong, and then this is their new evidence. So I don't think that's it. And I'm going to go back to A again. And I have that, I know the central hypothesis isn't owned by the author. The author doesn't own anything. He presents different people's points of view. But this just says described. It doesn't say forwarded in. It doesn't say, right, presented as truth or anything like that. It just says described. And so I think that's a safe word, right? You can describe it and it's not necessarily your personal opinion. I think that's going to be right. So you see how my process here is I do one pass, I get rid of the really obviously terrible one. And then I'm also kind of leaning toward one, and I can kind of dig into it. I can go into the word. If there's a word that I need to double check, I need to double check this wording, right? Here I had this explains the scientific question, but I don't think it's explaining the question. It's just saying you guys had crappy data. That's not explaining a question, okay? So that's how I can get it right. Fast pass, slow pass. That's how you guys should be approaching it. Just that process, some of you guys don't have a good process and you're kind of all over the place. Just honing in on that process can get you 10 or 20 points pretty fast. I'm going to teach you guys one more strategy, which is the idea of scope, which is just really pay attention to the question, you guys. You guys spend so much time looking at answer choices, and a lot of those answer choices are written to fool you. Pay attention to the question. Find the scope of the question. What I mean by scope of the question, I want you to find keywords. So which choice best supports the idea that the ability of a species to use camouflage effectively can provide an evolutionary advantage? So if you use camouflage, you get an evolutionary advantage. Guess what evolutionary advantage means? That means I survive. Survival of the fittest, right? This is Darwin, okay? So I'm going to write survival of the fittest. Survival. So I get to survive if I have camouflage. So I'm looking for camouflage helps me survive, okay? We're going to look at 10 to 13 first. I like to go backwards on these. In plants, the use of coloration or pigmentation as a vital component of acquiring food or a means of attracting pollinators has been well studied. That just means scientists have looked at it. It tells me nothing of whether it gives me an evolutionary advantage. It doesn't tell me if it helps me survive. This is just a fun fact. Look, people have looked at it a lot. That's great. But I don't have that keyword, survival. I don't have that keyword, evolutionary advantage, okay? 7 and 9, I have camouflage. I don't have that, okay? So probably not it, half right at best. 7 and 9. This may seem like a good strategy and fairly common in the animal kingdom, but who ever heard of a plant doing the same thing? And what's this? This is the idea that blending into your surroundings to avoid being eaten helps you survive longer, reproduce, and increase their fitness, right? Passing on their genes to the next generation. Ooh, this is actually what I want to do, what I want. And it says this may seem like a good strategy. So basically the idea of using camouflage to survive may seem like a good strategy, but who ever heard of a plant doing it? So the main idea of the sentence is plants don't really use camouflage, do they? Right? It is not to say that camouflage helps them survive. It says using camouflage is a good idea for a lot of animals, but who ever heard of a plant doing it? So the main idea of this isn't quite here. So I'm going to do a scribble. This is better than D because at least the this refers to camouflage, but I want the camouflage itself, and here it is, 2 to 7. Individuals that are able to blend into their surroundings and avoid being eaten are able to survive longer, reproduce, and thus increase their fitness, pass on their genes to the next generation compared to those who stand out more. Okay, and I end at 7, so that's this. So we have survive longer, increase their fitness. This is evolutionary advantage right here. Pass their genes along. This is the evolutionary advantage. And it says, if you blend into your surroundings, that means camouflage, right? You survive more. Bingo. Scope of the question. And it says, species of a species. These are animal species, but still species. Can use camouflage, and they get an evolutionary advantage. You see how I have all those keywords? And the purpose of 2 to 7 is to say this. 7 to 9 includes that idea a little bit, but that's not the purpose of 7 to 9, right? That's the scope of the question is I really want to be on target. I want to be on target with these keywords. And if I focus on those keywords, I can get it right. Okay? Last tip is math. I want you to target at least 4 math topics this week, okay? And you want to go in depth seriously. You can do that again, like our online course has it, where you go and you select from your study list, and then you create a study list, and then you do all the worksheets. If you got Khan Academy, you can use the math in Khan Academy. Sometimes it's a little imbalanced, but it's a lot better than a lot of the other things in Khan Academy. You can also do books if you prefer books. There are 4 main areas where I typically find are the highest yield. Those are percents, rates and conversions, quadratics, and linear equations and slope. Those are the 4 areas I recommend you focus on the most if any of them are where you struggle. The additional topics in math shows up a lot less. The algebra shows up a lot more. So if you're trying to impact your score, you want to focus on what shows up more. So that's your heart of algebra and your passport to advanced math first. Cool? Cool. I hope you guys like this video. So please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and good luck on your SAT. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time. Let us know how you do on your tests in the comments below. Take care.